everybody. It's Joe Cox, the pop marketer, and you are listening to another episode of the Pop Marketing Podcast. And look who I have with us today for a part two. Talk so much. Luke Hurd, so good to see you, man.
You too.
How are you? Like lots, you've been keeping busy here over the last couple of years.
Yeah. Busy doesn't quite even cut it. Let's say that it's been. I'm in a car with the gas pedal glued to the floorboard, and I'm just trying to steer it away from people.
And oncoming anything rocks, and
yes.
I was never good at driving games. Outrun was not my jam.
I might have hit a few things here and there, just no people.
Right. I think that's important.
Right.
Just stuff it can be replaced. Let's see. Why would you be so busy right now? The last time we talked, we were talking about spatial design, creating in 3D. Had a really awesome kind of conversation that shed new light and made me think differently about what it is to be a creator, and then the opportunity of a 3D of creating in the third dimension. And so I put some pieces together then, but since the last time we talked, a few things have happened to you personally. We could say that you became a father.
I did.
That takes up some time. So that's
does.
great. Congratulations. Let's see. And then that wasn't enough for you. So you've also changed jobs.
I did do that as well. I figure why not? Why change one thing when you can change all the things?
Yeah, get it over. Yeah. Tear it off like a Band-Aid, fresh start. It's
right,
great.
Like you're starting a mower.
In a pandemic, throw it all in there. Like you got to have something else to think about.
Right.
So director of experience design, XR for VMLY&R, working with God knows what brands you're talking to and working with inside the space of experience and augmented reality. And to go back to that, still an augmented reality instructor and creator, working with Spark AR, created a course. I actually have you in my talk, where I have you with the devil face. Like, what's the devil from Legend? Did he have a name?
Oh, Darkness.
It's just Darkness.
Yeah.
It's not Lucifer. I get it, but it's very Lucifer-esque.
Yeah.
So Darkness, you with Darkness, and basically I'm like, hey, if you want to know where to start with AR, VR, the beautiful thing that's different from when Web 2.0 came out is like most of these things are free.
Right.
Like Spark AR, download it today. You have instructors online classes all over the place. And I tell people, I swear to them, I'm like, you couldn't do it in 2 hours. Like, get in there. And I'm like, you can go in there and create. It's made so even without programming
free. That's
so
right.
Like, no excuses. Like, if you want to jump into it, what a beautiful time to be alive in aspects of hey, if you want to know where things are going, that's it. So you do that as well. Just
so much, and also the certification stuff as well. So worked with Meta and some of the people who created Oracle's certification framework to create the certification framework also for Spark AR. So you can go get certified on it. So I also do the curriculum. The curriculum kind of backs up the certification to a degree. It's not quite one for one. It's not meant to be, but pretty close. So yeah, do all that stuff too. So it has been a busy couple of years.
We're talking today about this. We kind of decided so many different things to talk about. Why the hell wouldn't we talk about the metaverse? I'd talk about it. I love the word. This idea should not be a surprise to anybody. Like popular culture, we've known this is something we wanted.
Yeah.
I think we wanted to be inside of a computer from the first one we built, right? And I'm a Tron kid, and that's showing, that's a deep cut now. But I mean, Ready Player One, Holodeck, like all of these things have been in our head. Technology just is catching up.
Yeah.
right? The space is catching up.
Yeah.
So I want to talk about the metaverse, specifically geek out a little bit about what's going on and why, AR, augmented reality, mixed reality, and virtual reality, like, well, why is that part of that conversation, right? Like, what part does that play inside of the metaverse? And then specifically, like you were saying, I love this conversation too. It's how do you, as a brand or a marketer or a creator, like, how do you start today? Like, what are some stuff you can like go into, so you don't have to go in hard,
That's
and
right.
create Nike World on Roblox, even though that's rad. I love it. What do you feel that kind of the metaverse is right now?
Well, first, let me say, to be totally fair, Facebook is a personal client of mine. And also, Facebook is a client of mine at my day job at VMLY&R as well. So I do a lot of Facebook work. I think one of the benefits of the relationship I have with them, though, is that they don't mind criticism about their platform and their products. At least not from me, because I'm pretty fair about the way that it all works. I'm pretty realistic about the way advertising works, the way revenue works. We can't give things away for free all the time, that kind of thing. So I come at it from a unique perspective, but I think one of the unique things about what they have done with their rebranding from Facebook to Meta has been to leverage their IP of Oculus so heavily. So, they have that, and then they also, part of this announcement going into Meta was also leaning on the AR side of things, which is the world that I work in there. So, in which they announced the curriculum and some other pieces about how this is a new career path for people, and this is a way you can go make money in these worlds now. They have a unique perspective in the way that they view it. I will say that their perspective tends to be heavily gamified, let's say escapism. It tends to, at least right now it does, focuses a lot on escapism. You can be anywhere, you can go anywhere, you can look anyway. And those are all great things. But that's only one like fragment of how I think the metaverse would work or will work, because the internet works that way. There's a show on MTV 10 years ago called Catfish, because people can be anybody on the internet. You could be a dog on the internet, it's always worked that way. So it's not anything different that way. It's just visual more visual, more immersive. So, but what I think is cool is that a lot of us are ourselves out there. I'm myself. You'll find me as Luke Hurd pretty much everywhere online. My full name, which is, I guess, a little weird, but you can go by a handle or moniker or screen name, whatever they call it these days. I grew up with handle, but right.
I did too. Yeah, Avatar is cool. I'll take it.
I'll take it.
Handles. This feels right.
It does feel right. But it's interesting because it's like nothing's really changed. We're just moving towards a more spatial way of experiencing these type of things. So when we talk about the metaverse, a lot of it tends to focus so heavily on VR and so visually focused on these escapist worlds where I can go to Mars or I can go sit courtside in an NBA game anywhere but home. Is kind of the way that they market it. But I think what's so cool is that the metaverse is the flip side of that. I put a tweet out probably 2 months ago, actually, that was like, how come nobody talks about how this door swings the other way? It's about bringing all these digital things into the real world, not us going into a digital world. So, I mean, that's part of it, but the door swings both ways. So, what does that look like? And that's the metaverse I'm interested in, honestly, is what does that look like to live in the real world, to interact with real people, but to still consume digital content and not feel like I'm a device manager for my device, which I feel like is really what we're all doing right now. Meaning that most of the interactions I do with my phone are minimizing windows, clicking buttons, typing on my phone. It's all done with my fingertips. I'm worried about swapping between apps. opening a new thing. Even when I want to use speech to text, I still have to click a button to get that to work. So like there's still so much, digitation that you have to do, and so much mental work you're doing with your device, that I'm looking for that to go away. When that goes away and the computing just does its own thing, and it's behind the scenes, and we can have it be exposed in a real world in a spatial way, I think that's the metaverse. I think that's the cool thing, where I can walk down the street and still be part of this world and not feel like I'm sitting at home, like Wally with the headset on. I don't think anybody wants that. I don't think that's really what anybody wants. It's fun to go lose yourself, but as humans, as a society, we need people, we need each other, we need connections. And I think that that's just something that is really cool, that nobody talks about enough with the metaverse. Is that's the point. The point is to like go back to those roots of interacting with each other and not feeling like the device that we're interacting with is the thing that we're interacting with to interact with the people. We want to interact with the people, not the device. And right now we're doing a lot of device interaction. So I think that's the cool thing, is the removal of the device, kind of the same way that books disappear as you're reading a book. You're turning the pages. It's not a thing that is in your way at all. The tech removes itself and you get lost in the story. That's what I'm looking forward to. The metaverse will be the tech removing itself, and I can just get lost in the story with you, with my wife, with my kid, maybe by myself, maybe as I'm walking down the street, whatever it may be. So I think it's a lot broader than I think people give it credit for. And that's just AR and VR that I'm really talking about. That's just ways that we experience the metaverse. So I'm not even talking about the economy and what it means to own your own data and be your own, own your own individual person.
We don't have enough time, right? Unfortunately, but it is, what you're saying is kind of a fundamentally I love it. And this is why I love talking to you, because I know it. We know it. The idea of the metaverse, really, what you're saying is like start here and don't go any further, right? It's really just a more merging of the digital, of our digital kind of life and our natural life or physical world, right? So it's just more of that merging. It's already, folks, really merged. So what I'm always saying is, hey, this is just building off the fundamental building blocks of the very first web page, or like the decentralization and the idea of the internet from the beginning, right? Totally. It's all built. It's nothing like that's just a new thing that has been built. It's just more layers and all these kind of things merging together. But I do feel like you're saying it really makes me even more excited, because it makes it even bigger. It's like, yes, and it can be this virtual world where it can open up to this place that in space where I can go into or share, it's something apart from the natural world, but it's still me inside the computer. But maybe just bigger than even idea of that is the augmentation and then the integration of all of that into our natural worlds to make it better.
Enhanced reality.
Yeah, to make it way less, because we know we have a huge problem. If you don't think we have a huge problem with people staring at their phones at just, the Black Mirror, they made a freaking, dystopian show about it.
It's crazy. You can just go Google, you can go Google 90% of data or 10% of data. If you Google one of those two phrases, you'll see quickly that in the past 3 years, it accounts for 90% of the data that we've transmitted over the internet. So of all the time that the internet's been around, 90% of the data is accounted for in the last 3 years, which means that it's a hockey stick of data being transmitted. I mean, to say that lightly, it's more than a hockey stick. But to process and display all that data, for you to be able to manually search it and think that your little primitive wetware brain is capable of processing that much data is absurd. You need a computer to do it for you, and your device is going to have to be supercharged, or otherwise you're going to spend all your time managing it. So that's where we talk about machine learning and AI, it comes in these little pieces here. Because that's where it matters, because you don't want to sit there and screw with your phone all day long to figure out what's the best way to do this. I mean, that's why Google is so cool. It combs through all of these results and gives you these relevant results through machine learning. And it does it over and over and over again to refine itself. That does it on a search engine. Imagine if that's doing that locally on your phone, understanding how you open apps, understanding where you're looking on your phone. So as I look around my phone, it knows that I'm looking for, Facebook or Snapchat or my camera. And it's like, here you go. Without me going, oh, I need to go to this thing and this, where did I put that icon again? That stuff's really cool. And then another thing that really leverages that idea of getting out there in the world is that if you think about our progress from Web 1 to Web 2, Web 1 was all about these networked computers that we sat in front of at home. Web 2 was where we got out into the world. We got mobile phones. So it's like, this is a logical progression of us going out into the world. We're not going to go back to our homes and put headsets on. That's the opposite way of the world we just came from. And I mean, it's cool. Don't get me wrong. I still sit at home. I'm sitting at you, talking to you at home on my desktop. So, I mean, it's not that there's not a use for it. It's just not. It's not all there is. It's not all there is. We all know what it means to take your phone, put it in your pocket, and get the hell out of your house. It feels great, as long as you have your phone. When you don't have your phone, it feels a little terrifying sometimes. But, I don't know. I think there's just so much cool stuff there. And we know that all these companies are investing money in it. I mean, Apple, Microsoft, Google, Amazon, Facebook, those are the top 5 companies in the world. They're all dumping money into AR. They all have AR platforms. It's not going to go anywhere. Definitely going to be a continually evolving and growing thing as we build the metaverse.
Do you think it's already here, or do you have an argument of like we haven't even seen it begun yet, right? Like,
it's already here. It's already here. Yeah.
It's just we haven't. I even said this to a friend yesterday. I was like, I thought Zuck was crazy whenever he bought Oculus to the first. I was like, you must have a bigger plan, because I just didn't see it at the time. And trust me when I say, like, I should have seen it, but I didn't, because it was so off of what it didn't feel connected. And now it feels like, oh, well, this is not just hey, let's just jump on this metaverse train. Well, this was something that, at least for them, I feel like it's been a lot. There's been a lot to build the road, to build the plumbing, not just. And basically, my other thought is this: I don't feel like Meta owns the metaverse just because they name themselves that. I don't even feel like they think they will own the metaverse. Maybe I'm wrong, but
they don't.
The idea of Web3 is, and the metaverse in general, is it's not an ownable. It's not. Our heads are stuck in Web 2, in centralization, and like one or two companies punching each other over it.
Totally. So I find myself defending Facebook to a degree. I mean, there's things that Facebook does, of course, that are indefensible. There's things that they do with certain ways that they allow media to get shared online and get dispersed is a little terrifying to me. I'll be totally honest with you. But as a company, I know a lot of the people who work there. I know a lot of people who build this tech. I know a lot of the people who are responsible for building the stuff that does facial recognition, not knowing who you are, but knowing where your eyes and your mouth and how open they are and stuff. These are great people. These are completely honest, normal people. And they feel like they are building tech that is going to change the world. And I think that they're right. And if they don't do it, somebody's going to. So, and whoever that is going to be viewed as kind of the big baddie in the room. In the 90s, it was Microsoft and Bill Gates. Funny enough, Bill Gates is now back in the news, but for a different reason. But it was Bill Gates, and those were the GIFs that you'd see in on AOL or AOL Instant Messenger would be these, Bill Gates with devil horns with the Microsoft logo spinning around behind them, because they controlled the world. Before that, it was IBM. Guess who took a shot at them? Apple did. And now it's Facebook. It's just because whoever the biggest person in the room is going to be that target. So I don't know. I'm a little. I'm glad that they are publicly talking about things like the way that Oculus connects. You haven't needed to use a Facebook account to get into Oculus, and wanting to remove that.
Absolutely.
Totally.
Huge. I know many people that should be on and were really wanted to use it, but would not use it because it part of the deal was you had to have a Facebook account, link it to your Facebook account.
If it connected and it made sense, I would be more prone to understanding why it's there. But it doesn't really benefit me in any way. I can't really use Messenger in a lot of ways that I would want to, or post to Facebook. They've even removed sharing from Facebook out of Oculus now, so you can't even post to Facebook anymore. I just don't quite understand what the integration was even for. I felt like it was just, it just didn't feel right. And I think everybody felt that way. And I think they eventually kind of came around to that idea that it's probably not the best move. But, and if you're going to talk about the metaverse and talk about decentralization and ownership and giving rights to creators, you can't have a centralized connection point like that. It just doesn't make any sense like that.
And it's funny that you're helping me again on kind of just shaping some ideas and the way I think of the metaverse. You have been focused a bit in this conversation, which is awesome, about kind of just, I was going to ask about AI if we had time, but sure. We're in it and it makes sense now to me, because it's like, think about how much your time you're on your phone, and think about how much time are you swiping, manually going through a ton of different, just managing the 100 apps that I have, remembering where I put them, opening that up, having a very focused on one thing, holding it up. Oh God, a lock, I really know when I look ugly whenever it doesn't recognize me. Totally. I wake up in the morning and I'm like, dude, this angle's so bad that the thing doesn't even recognize me. Like that's,
I got to shave.
Then I shake it off and I'm like, okay, I put my chin on. I'm like, okay, I'm better now. It's me. But there's just so much. And you're thinking of it as well, that's what we need the computer to do some of those jobs for us, right? If we can get that stuff out of the way, it'll help us have a better experience, period. It'll help us be more fluid with our use of technology. So we're not spending as much time trying to tame it, but we can actually lift our heads up into the world versus down out of the world, right? Kind of idea, which I love. But it's also, when in a bigger internet wise, when you look at Web3, it's kind of the idea of decentralization is, why do I manually have to do all this stuff? Why do we have to have a center in between third person?
Right.
Can't we have AI kind of take care of a lot of this stuff for us, a lot of these jobs for us, and not have to worry about a lot of the human crappiness, and mistake making and the things in the way, and just have it be the computer do that grunt work for us.
Yeah,
and stand out of the way and allow us to.
People get scared about that, though. That people react.
I get it. I mean, they do, because it feels like they're giving up control to Skynet.
Totally. I give this hour-long talk to brands and internally too, basically about why we're talking about AR and VR and AI and ML and all this stuff. which kind of comes down to just everything being in the same stack. So that's why we talked about responsive web and the cloud and everything else that back then in the same stack. So we're talking about a new stack. We're kind of almost in that stack a little bit. We have some of the ML and AI out there. We have definitely have some decentralized stuff out there. If you've been paying attention at all to any kind of crypto stuff or NFTs, that's what that's all about. So it's already permeating. The visual stuff is always the last to follow because it's the toughest stuff to figure out. The displays and all, how much power draw and all that. So,
totally. And you never think about it, but I think about it constantly. I never thought about it before because a good design, you won't think about it. It's invisible, right?
Right.
But now I'm like, man, things get really interesting when you're thinking about a whole new design outside of a little square box.
Yeah.
And on top of the world, right?
Yeah. I mean, part of one of those talks is talking about how, for 100,000 years as human beings, we talked to each other and we just conversed and we just spoke and we interpreted information around from the world through our skin and our sight, touch, through our touch and sight, orally, audibly, perceptually. We could tell gestures and the way that people sit or carry themselves. There's a lot of information that we glean without ever doing anything. We just sit there and we can just absorb this information. And
whether we consciously know that we're doing it or not, which 100%. Is the coolest thing in the world, right?
100%.
That's what intuition, it really leaves itself up to. Like, our brain is collecting way more than it knows our little monkey brains are capable of like dealing with.
Totally.
Right.
And then we go to talk about it or experience it or share it with someone else. And we have to do it all through our fingers, every little last bit of it. We type through our fingers, we scroll with our fingers, we tap, we pinch, we zoom, all of it goes through our fingers. And how much communication do you do in your daily life with your fingers to the people around you? Not very, maybe some pointing and stuff, but it's not that. It's not that kind of communication. So we've kind of like co-opted the way we communicate to be in our fingertips, and it's a bottleneck for information, to pass information back and forth. So what that means is that, around 8,000 years ago, we developed the written language. So we started doing that on like clay tablets in Sumeria, recording tax records, of course, because that's what we'd want to record as something about money. Right. So tax records, but we're finally recording information, but we did it on these flat clay tablets, and we didn't do it because they were cool squares. We did it because they stacked. It was something you could go stack in a corner. It was this reason that they were flat and they were rectangles, because they made sense in our physical world to have a flat rectangle to be a thing that you would write on. And that happened over and over again with pages, and then eventually books, and then eventually these dynamic screens, computers, all the same. You and I are still talking together through this flat rectangle. 8,000 years later, it might update with liquid crystals and stuff, but it still has the same stuff on it. Our drawings move and stuff, but drawings, text, same stuff, same bottlenecks, exactly the same bottlenecks. So what we're talking about is, how do we take all this other information that we use to communicate with each other and bring that out in the real world? What if I can tell if you're happy or sad? I mean, there's a lot you can use computers and AI to learn about people, to get information about people that doesn't require you to walk up as a human being and input it into a computer with using your fingers. So if you think about it, computers are really just opening up their inputs right now. We really just have a big open input, and we're saying, okay, now we want to care about the way your eyes move and the way your facial muscles move and the way you follow something on a screen and the way that you are sitting there looking bored. There's so much information now that computers can take in that is, it's kind of like when web browsers first were able to tell your location, like that was one new variable, your location. And suddenly we called it personalization. Oh, localization. We can localize your web experience to exactly where you are. Well, with AR and with VR and with machine learning and AI, we're talking about opening up hundreds of new variables that we can now really personalize experiences with. From localization to not just where I am on the planet, but how tall am I? How far off the ground am I from the planet? That makes a difference. What direction am I facing on the planet? That makes a difference. How close am I to another human being? That makes a difference. I mean, there's just so much stuff there. And on top of that, now you're talking about having passive people in the experience. Suddenly there's people who don't have these devices who are walking around in my line of sight and interacting with my experiences that I have in these glasses or whatever, and they don't even have them. So how do I design stuff? How do I care about stuff as a brand for those people? How do I let those people know, one, what they're missing, two, that they're being recorded, three, that they're part of an experience that they haven't opted into? There's just so much stuff. There's so much cool stuff out there around this stuff, around the metaverse and the way that people interact with these devices that I think they just don't really think that much about. It's kind of looked at more of like going from 4K to 8K, but it's really like going from like a 4K television to like a movie theater that sprays water in your face, you know?
Right. Right. And that's not even it. That's
not even it.
The closest you and I can.
Right.
And that's what's so cool about it is when I talk to people on it too, I try not to get too we have a spidey sense. It's not like our first day on the job or our first rodeo. I've seen this happen. And like I tell everybody, like when Web 1 came out, I was there and I knew it was a game changer for me, especially living in the country, in the middle of the country, without any kind of ideas of all this cool stuff going on in the world. We would get it really late, and just knowing I could tap in, and there was communities, and there's people that like D&D or whatever weird thing that you're into, and you could like connect with other places. Like you had a library of human records on a computer. AOL. It was pretty awesome at the time for some reason. And then Web 2.0, I built a career around, right? Like it's awesome. Like read and write was awesome, and mobile was awesome. And it's just like, it was a really big shift. And this is the next shift, right? Like, and it's not a dream. It's like, what do you think all this self-driving cars, what do you think the plumbing's all on? Like, you brought up, I saw a video you made. People should check it out. I know it's on LinkedIn, but it's you visited your friends over at Niantic, who made Pokemon Go, and before that, they made another game that kind of crowdsourced all that information that Pokemon Go was able to do, the geo kind of stuff. And now, God, do you know how many human beings and data they have of people walking around
You have no idea.
It's unfathomable. It makes my brain hurt. But think about the millions of people that play it, the millions of people that play all the time. All this stuff, you're right, is already here. Like, we're not building it from the ground up. All that kind of geo information. It's also, am I wrong to think that this is a lot of it is where self-driving cars are dealing with too?
Yes, 100%. So
because they'll have to deal with cars that aren't AI driven too,
so
right?
There's a guy named I'm going to destroy his last name, so we'll just call him Timmy. He works for Volvo.
Volvo's doing crazy stuff.
Crazy stuff. So he does he's the head of their innovation, does some AR VR stuff for them. And they literally take it from the point of like, we design everything about our car for the person on the sidewalk, the person not in the car. So it's like you're standing on the sidewalk and a Volvo drives by. They design it from that standpoint, which is like, what does it mean to get hit by a Volvo? I mean, they do it seriously. They care a lot about just the passive people in the design, which I think is very fascinating because you're so, again, I'm in experienced design. I've been a developer and stuff, but you always start so quickly at like, okay, they're already here and they're playing our game and, and they're going to be catching, hamburgers coming down. Are they going to be playing your game? Are they already here? Like, that's really I don't know. It's just really interesting because you're not really designing for people. You're kind of just designing a game, but then you have to think about, this is what was wrong with the web at the beginning of all this, the antiquity of the web when it was powered by developers and no ill will towards developers. I'm also a developer too, but just to say, when the web was powered just by developers, it was kind of an ugly thing. It wasn't very usable. It didn't fit on a lot of screens because screens were 600 by 400 and 800 by 600. Very rarely was it 1024. You didn't have that much width, but they didn't care. They were designing shit for whatever, and, but it looked that way. And then eventually you started getting more into the craft of like what it looked like. And you start seeing Flash websites, which again, not very usable, but more leaning into the design sense.
Way bigger jump in usability.
And then once you get experience in the door, in information architecture and all these other roles that you get alongside developers, that's when you start seeing responsive, user-focused websites and e-commerce appear, and people actually using tools on the web, as opposed to it being a library, an information source, or it being like a creative playground, which were like kind of the first two versions of the web, and then eventually it was like, hey, we can make money at this. So I think this world is kind of in that same sense. I think it's being created by game designers, because that's who's creating all these engines who do everything. So if you don't know game design, you definitely should. That's literally like the next web design. So go learn game design. If you're young and you're listening to this, go learn game design.
And you can do it for free.
You can do it for free.
I mean, I was just in Raleigh last week, and Raleigh's the home of Epic Games, dude.
Yeah.
I get to the airport and the triangle's there, right? Like I learned all about, I was like, oh God, I've always heard of the triangle, and they have, but all these things that come out of that, like Epic Games was started in a garage. Now they're taking over, they bought an old mall just like a few months ago, and they're taking over that as like a campus, right? Like an old mall. And I'm like, dude, Epic, this is the center point, one of the center points because of Epic. Not because of Fortnite, but because of Unreal Engine. And then you look at what is it? MetaHuman? What is their
MetaHuman? Yeah.
And look at MetaHuman, and you look at all those tools, and guess what? All free to play until you start making money from them, right?
Totally.
It's
and not only that, you can do full virtual productions with them. I can't talk about what it's for, but we just did a whole virtual production in Unreal Engine, just like The Mandalorian does. If you know what The Mandalorian is, it's exactly that same thing. Did it out in a huge airline hangar out in London, or out in England, and shot out there for a week or so. And I talked to John Bazell from Unreal Games, Unreal Engine, out at AWE last week, and a little bit about this thing. But that's what a cool thing. You're taking this virtual engine that just creates virtual. I mean, it's, you can create virtual worlds or whatever, but then you're bringing it to the digital world. Like they have such a smart approach to the metaverse with the way that they partner with people, with Fortnite, and the way that they partner with Fortnite. And then just the way that they bridge it into creators, hardcore leveraging it into creators and the creator community, and then obviously digital production. So, I mean, you're getting movie industries being able to create things at $300,000 productions on a budgets that they would have had to spend millions on before. And it's just crazy, man. Just crazy.
They definitely have a vision. And I did not mean to take you down another road, but like with the idea, I think it's important for us to understand that we're not talking, when we say gaming's important and game design, it is just because it's the engine.
Yes.
It's going to be the engine of the metaverse, meaning if it's a graphical, way more graphic heavy, I need the experience is more like you and me in real life. This is closer than we've ever been. Video's awesome. But like, if we want to put it in a spatial place, the amount of crunching you're going to do, you don't want to build a billion different engines. That's the tough part, the crunching, the building that. And Unreal.
That's the browser. I mean, just think about it like
Yes,
the
that's the
browser.
browser.
You know,
That's
so
great.
the bane of existence when I first started doing web development back in the mid 90s was there were no standards. So fonts would render different between Netscape and Internet Explorer, and different on Mac Netscape and Mac Internet Explorer. And there were no style sheets at the time. So it was like, how do you even target these things? So you were like trying to do all this annoying stuff, and then you had this annoying thing where, you know, in Internet Explorer it would be font size one word. In Netscape it was font dash size. So you had these. Then when style sheets came out, you had two style sheets, one for Microsoft, one for Netscape. It's that way right now in this world. You build an Unreal, it lives in Unreal. You know what I mean? If you build for Internet Explorer, it lives in Internet Explorer. So you do kind of have to learn the nuances of the browser that you're working in. But you can see which, and I'll use the browser term again, which browsers are making waves in those areas. Which ones are really coming out of the gate, swinging hard, and saying, we want to own this space. From that perspective. But the game development thing is so big. I mean, I say that many, many times in every talk I give, which is literally, if, you know, web developers created the two-dimensional web, game developers are going to create the next one. AR developers are going to create the next one. VR developers are going to create the next one. Web developers and understanding how to lay things out with X and Y and relative values and ratios, that's done with. If we don't need to care about ratios and screens, we are always going to need to care about those to some degree. The same reason we have landlines, the same reason we have all this old technology. We still have COBOL that's still being out, that's still in the world. So is Fortran. There's just less of it. There's going to be less and less of this eventually. But that's the way the world's going to go. I think it's just.
But that's the way it goes. I mean, and always. That's the way it goes. We move, and
why wouldn't it?
Why? Like, that's the kind of our point as humans, right? Like the progress of that, and as things move into mainstream and down, the energy is always like, that's what pop marketing is about. It's the energy is in the novel, is in the edge, is in what's coming and new, and then the old stuff gets cheaper, and like. Kind of just it moves. It's not it and people can make a lot of money, a lot of business off of that part of it. But we're talking about where the puck's moving, right? Like where we are gonna go, like it or not. And I think in a lot of points that I really like it is that. Do you feel like we'll have more control? Do you feel like in a decentralized space, or what they talk with Web3, do you feel like it does give more control to the creators, to the user, or
in its current form? No. I'm gonna dog on NFTs for just a second. I like NFTs. I like the idea of digital ownership, but I just want to talk really quick about what concerns me about it. NFTs as a whole are not decentralized. You're still tied to that website and that platform. So if your super rare goes down or foundation goes down or disappears forever, then your ownership and your certificate of ownership disappears forever unless somebody picks that torch up and can certify that all that stuff is real. So even though it exists on the blockchain, even though it exists on Ethereum or whatever blockchain, Tezos or whatever it may be, if you don't have that other ledger off to the side saying this thing is owned by this person, when that ledger goes away, if that ledger is not decentralized, then you're not decentralized. So that's the thing that they struggle with right now. That ledger right now, in most cases, on almost all cases of NFT world, is not decentralized. Not to say you shouldn't practice in this and support artists. You definitely should. But it's something just to keep in mind that you're at the beginning of this. It's a little shaky. So definitely proceed at your own risk, because it can seem like parts of it are decentralized and it's walking that walk. But if you look into it a little bit more, you'll realize that the ownership aspect is not quite as decentralized as you might assume.
Here's one for you. Like, I think it is a great place if you want to go into the space, which everyone should.
Yes.
You should go in because, trust me, there is no way for me to write a book to you or do in any service other than you have to jump in, because there's a lot of, and you'll learn about crypto, you'll learn about the ledger, you'll learn about things that are fundamentally going to be part of this Web3 and is going to kind of pull everything together and gives in the future some kind of ownership. So I think you're totally right on. But if you do want to play it, I think it is worthy to be able to get 100%. In those spaces, just to get on a Discord and watch how a really good community kind of rallies around rallies around endows and like these ideas of how these things work, getting the administration stuff out of the way and allowing people to kind of just organize and build from a community rather than like a head of something. It works and it's happening right now.
Totally. It's really cool.
Cool.
I really I just put a tweet out yesterday because I thought this was kind of funny because, in the 2000s, late 1999, early 2000s, the internet was a different place. We hadn't really seen commerce take off on the internet.
It's hard to picture it, but it is 100% commerce did not happen.
Yeah, it just wasn't happening. I mean, there was like CD Now, which Amazon ended up buying, and a couple other ones that were doing all right, but you're not even buying CDs anymore, much less buying them online. So
we're 10 years out from Amazon, like you're out from
what it would be. And there's this interesting thing where we looked at the internet and said, so the music industry started taking notice right around this time, 99, 2000. That's when Napster first started hitting. I remember I showing everybody in my agency Napster, and I think we were just dogging the ISP, our internet service for like 2 weeks.
Every college on the planet, every job, every server was getting used.
So you have this interesting aspect and view of ownership back then, and that was nobody owns the electron, and it was very anti-digital rights management, anti-DRM. When you bought a CD with DRM on it, it was no fun. You'd put it in your CD player, and it'd open up the software you had to install, and Sony even got in trouble for installing spyware on people's computers to unlock it, to be able to use this key to say this is a valid copy of this thing. And here we are right back here talking about DRM for everybody. It's weird. I'm all for it. But what happened?
The guys, maybe you're sniffing around where I've been thinking a lot of, which sucks.
I know.
Is like, am I just arguing for freedom? But really, I'm giving giant companies the ability to make money again.
Totally.
On having to buy every single thing and have ownership. Instead of a DVD, it's an NFT, right? Or whatever.
Right. And I can't lend it to my friend. There's a whole thing behind it. I mean, there's already kind of a thing behind lending DVDs, but yeah, I think that I'm all for having these cool questions, though. I like this. I like the evolution of the world. I like that the world changes. So you're either a fundamentalist where you dig deeper into the whole of the thing that you know, or you're an extremist where you're trying to radically change it all. Mm-hmm. I tend to be on the extremist side of things, and I really like the idea of things changing. I rearrange my room all the time and that kind of thing. So I like that things change, even if it's for things I don't understand and it feels like it might be for the worse or whatever. Because it just means that things are evolving and moving. So I'm all for this. I'm all for NFTs. I'm all for digital ownership. I'm all for the idea of having an alternative currency, and the idea of what that means, of just saying like, hey, money, of course, is what we just give value to something. We're just giving value to it. Why can't we just go have this other thing and give it value, just like Beanie Babies or anything else, but we're going to actually treat this as currency, call it currency and treat it as currency and give it value. And
because it's an idea, and currency is an idea, just like everything that kind of holds us together as an idea. So if enough people get together and say this
And
is
how
that
awesome is the
value.
internet? How many cool things has the internet just flipped upside down to where the industry just doesn't know what to think about it? Starting with the music industry, not starting with, but
It was
the music
one of the
industry,
first, and then you have the new,
advertising,
and news, which
news.
sucks, really hurt us in the long run because we
I
were like,
know.
"Hey, Twitter can give us news. We don't need the media." And then now I'm like, "Oh God, where's those old school journalists? We need them back.
We need
We
those
need them
old school
so
journalists
hard."
back so bad.
But you're totally right. It started really disrupting pretty early, and why is because it reached everything. It changed everything, right? And it gave everything kind of that digital layer. Metaverse is just that next layer on top of the layer.
I mean, you could kind of even argue that the QAnon thing is the first metaverse cult.
Yeah.
It's going to happen again, man. It's going to happen again.
Unfortunately, it is part of our culture now. It's part of the amazing stuff that we get when we pull a lever. Another lever is pulled on the other side of it, right?
Well,
and
fire can cook your food or burn your house down. What do you do with it?
But it is out of the control, and it feels like it's the train. Stopping the train might not be the best decision in human, evolution.
There's so many cool. There's so many interesting things about humanity and what we've done in the past, like 150 years. If you think about it, we never really had the Department of Education. Let's say mass education. Mass education.
Yeah, how new is that? How new is that in the concept of
120
humans?
years old. Yeah, before that we didn't have anything like that. Now we teach all kids pretty much the same type of stuff across the country. Roughly the same. You can move from Georgia to Missouri and you're pretty much going to be using around the same level of textbooks and stuff. That's crazy. That's not crazy, but that's pretty monumental that we were able to put all that together. Now we have it on a global scale where it's like, we're all part of this weird experiment. We're all kind of figuring it out together. I don't think it's good to be scared of it. I think when you get scared, you get a little fundamentalist about stuff. You kind of tighten around what you know and try to strengthen what you know, and you're not open to new extreme ideas. And I think
you start getting really protective of those things and they become part of your identity, right? Like it's hard to let them go. I get it.
It is.
I get it. I
Me
do.
too.
I definitely do. I mean,
I'm in my 40s. I totally get it.
Yeah. And if you don't think that don't sit up at night on both sides of the camp, you're crazy. I am proud that I am in a constant battle with myself on each side of the road. I'm happy that I'm smart enough just to know that I don't know shit. Yes. And like my mind can be shifted multiple times based on
But what does that mean? What does that mean in the metaverse? I mean, you brought up a good point, so the news or journalism anyway on the internet has been reduced to clickbait. It's been reduced to money. The most salacious, sensational headline generates the most clicks. Therefore, you get ad revenue.
It's a game, and it's an easy one to see, like the outcome of it. And it's very hard for me to see using the same mechanics and the same game system, which is advertising. Mm-hmm. It's hard for me to see a way out of it in our current model. You can talk about it. Me
too. I mean, even looking at, this is another ancient talk I used to give, but I used to have these screenshots of Fox News, MSNBC, CNN, Al Jazeera, BBC, and it was what followed the news article. So you scroll down, what's next? Almost all American news is clickbait nonsense headlines that are fake. Almost all of them. It's an ad unit that they put in there, and it's like, you won't believe what she saw, and it's on CNN, it's on Fox News, it's on MSNBC. How does that foster any trust with news organizations to leverage that type of advertising on your network when you're trying to say we're not fake news, but your ads are literally fake news? It's so strange. And imagine that in the metaverse. Imagine that kind of nonsensical disconnect of what your message is and how you advertise, or how you, not even, they don't advertise that way, but that's how they make a revenue, is by hawking fake news, quite literally. But it's not their journalists that do it. It's just their, it's an ad block that's on there.
Yeah,
it just
it's capital. It has to make money, and they have shareholders to answer to, and the system seems tough to like overcome.
Yeah.
Taking it to the metaverse, do you feel like it offers any ways outside of the traditional system? I mean, getting into it a little bit deeper, but in the future, do we see an ability to get trust back? Because it feels very antitrust, but I tell people be careful, because it doesn't. Here's why it seems antitrust. Look at AI and deep fakes. Mm-hmm. That's not going anywhere. Mm-hmm. In fact, it makes way better facial places than like most CGI right now. And I show a commercial with Bruce Willis where he just sold his identity, which is through AI, and his voice, which is all AI too. And you pay that, and he can be in your commercial. So he doesn't have to go and shoot it. He doesn't have to do anything. He's just there, and you sell his likeness or identity through that. A lot of NBA stars are doing that too. And then you have VTubers. I don't know if we've talked about it a little bit. As I've always asked you, I'm like, hey, how do I set this up, or where do I go for this, and can I do it in VR? And I've gone really deep, by the way. I love it, but you can be somebody else, right? Like this whole idea of metaverse is be somebody else. So it feels like it's all going to be one anonymous joke. Like the bad parts of the internet and the non-trust even get amped up. But for some reason, I don't feel that's.
I just don't think we're going to do that.
That's it.
I really hope not. So one of my favorite movie series, of course, is going to be Back to the Future, just because, again, I mentioned them in my 40s. But one of the reasons that I really like Back to the Future is because of how they treated the future, which is now the past. But how they treated the future in those movies was not Blade Runner. It was not
dystopian.
Yeah, it wasn't rainy and neon and dirty, and it was polluted or it wasn't.
It actually felt more like just kind of like our world now, with some.
There was kind of some dystopian funny parts, like the hovercraft conversion costing, I think, like $9 million. So showing like inflation had been out of control, or that they had abolished all lawyers. They had a sense of it, but it was real. It was like, yeah, shit sucks, but it's pink and green over here. There's bubble gum and pop over here, because that's the way the world is. Mm-hmm. It's always kind of been that way. The world was about to die in a nuclear holocaust. When I watched Back to the Future, there was a nuclear arms race between, two countries. And here I was sitting in a movie theater watching something about, time travel. So
talk about escapism. It's needed. Right. There's a place and time for it. Absolutely.
There definitely is. But it's like, how cool is that you can kind of look back and say that I don't want to say it's always been like this, because I do think that the internet has changed quite a bit of communication and the way that you can push mass media or push mass propaganda across people. I think that's something that's definitely very scary to me, just as a human being. But if we can make it through this part of it, and part of this too is just, like you said, the thing with trust. Teaching critical thinking to people is so important. And I get, part of it is saying I'm a very critical person. I criticize a lot, and if somebody tells me something happened, I'm like, I'm very distrustful of anything that seems slightly supernatural or
you're skeptical by nature.
Very skeptical by nature.
Not to say you're not open to whatever. It just is right. Like your.
But it doesn't mean I don't trust things.
It means your default is more of asking some questions.
Right. But I still think that leads me down a path of science. And it leads me down a path of having I don't know how to say this any other way, having a foot grounded in reality. So I think as long as we can continue to foster those things in people, in understanding that, how to tell deception, because you're never really going to stop it, I don't think, unless you can somehow put some sort of gatekeepy thing on the big communicative things out there like Facebook and stuff like that. But I don't know. I don't know how that works.
And I think it starts to come from the idea of trust would be, the ledger is something I could trust, right? That's the whole point of the blockchain is like, hey, the idea isn't super smart as in like it's a ledger. It's just universal.
But what do you do?
Like can people trust it? And then if it works for currency, could it work for something, could it work for that?
I think the biggest threat to that, I'm just going to say, I think the biggest threat to that is the ignorance around it. So there's a court case. I'm not even going to mention who it is or what it is. It just happened. And part of one of the arguments in it was when you zoom in on your phone, there's AI in there that modifies the pixels.
Yeah.
Now that's not what happens, but all it takes is some ignorant person to say that in a position of power. And it doesn't really matter if it's true or not. So if someone's in a position of power and they say, I don't trust this Ethereum thing, it's just a bunch of numbers. It doesn't make any sense. And then half of the country says, yeah, this is nonsense.
It's done.
It's done. So that part really scares me for the future because I feel like that's really where the propaganda piece comes in and understanding how to think critically, and understanding that, you can trust people, but you can't. Blind trust doesn't make any sense. I don't know any other way to say that, but that just came up this week. Of course, the pixel thing, and that was the whole thing with that trial. And but it got me thinking, like, what does that happen when a judge questions the validity of the blockchain because he's an idiot? What do you do?
Yeah, and we've seen it. We've seen it a lot. Like, look at any interview, mostly
you're relying on the jury at that point.
And now things are not getting less complex. Right. So it's going to be extremely interesting to live through. I'm very happy to be living through this time. Right. I am. And I'm fortunate and I'm happy to be able to see the future kind of as it goes on, and happy to like chat with somebody like you, just to be able to catch up. You're seeing a different point of view of things. It's just fine. I was tired. I don't want to talk about SEO. I don't want to talk about it's great that it's around. I'm a big fan of social optimization and what day should I post my post on. But dude, I've been waiting for this next evolution and
Me too.
Cannot wait to it's going to be a really big, it's going to be a fun show to watch and be a part of now that I'm in this part of my career. Why wouldn't?
I feel like I've been doing radio for 30 years and here comes the television.
Yeah.
And it's like, I'm all about the television. I want the television. Yeah. I need the television in my life.
And we talked a little bit about what it means to creators and what it means, for the consumer, for the human being that's going to be in the metaverse. Well, I wanted to, before we leave, thank you so much for spending a little extra time.
Of course.
But what I wanted to go into is something usable, because I love talking philosophy with you, or at least
I know.
But I rarely do it with folks these days, other than just myself back and forth here in the studio. But what about brands out there, marketers out there? Everybody's talking metaverse thanks to Zuckerberg and Meta. Trust me, I was giving metaverse talks 2 weeks before that, and I gave metaverse talk 2 weeks after that. The first one, there was 2 people that had heard what it is, and the second and the ones after that, everybody in the room at least has ideas. So. Yeah. It's a big part of mainstreaming the term and these ideas, right?
It is.
So thinking about 2022 plans and 23 plans, I just tell people the last thing you want to do, if you were a little bit behind when social came and Web 2.0 came, do you want to be do you want to be behind for it? Feel that horrible shit of pain that is being behind the, like where things are going. That was awful, right? As all these brands, it was just for kids, and then it was this, and then it built, and it was inevitably going to lead.
Yeah.
But we stagnate and we hold back. So I feel like
fundamentalism versus
it is, and it is order and chaos, right? And we do and need both, really.
It's like the supernova. It's like the sun,
Yeah,
it's like
or the universe sucking back and forth, right? Like, what do you think? What do you think brands can do now?
Great question. So, my first thing is to always come out of the gate swinging with the metaverse is not virtual reality. That's a lot of the misnomer is like, what virtual reality experience can we make with this? That's a big thing. So the metaverse is a stack. It's a tech stack. It's a tech stack in the same way that like when I first got on the computer, it was a desktop computer, local software that I used on there, and maybe a database that I kept taxes in or something. The next iteration of that was a browser instead of my desktop. Instead of localized software, I went to web pages. And instead of saving things on my desktop, I might save it to an FTP space or something like that, but still would save some stuff on my desktop. The next iteration, of course, is mobile web. And suddenly I'm using the cloud. So you can see that there's these stacks. And the metaverse is just that next stack. We're already in that stack. It started in 2016 or so. And that's really where you see Bitcoin, things like that. So I would say that, you get a lot of voice technology. That's another piece of it, because you got a lot of machine learning and things like that. So machine learning and AI are already pretty prevalent in our lives when it comes to speech to text, voice assistants, all that stuff. And you can see that was where a lot of brands played 3 or 4 years ago. People would make Alexa skills and things like that. And then you had brands that really leveraged it, like automotive brands like Ford, fully integrating voice assistants into their cars, and other cars as well, other brands. And that's kind of where it first started, was that multimodality. Instead of typing, what's an easier way for people to type? Well, cool. Nobody wants to type in their car. It makes sense. A lot of physical pieces there that make sense. So now that we're in this whole like beginning of the metaverse, I get a lot of brands that ask me like, how do we play in this space? And I have to say, again, start off by saying it's not VR, and then trying to get them to understand where people are in the metaverse right now. So the where that people are in the metaverse, I'll be honest with you, are NFTs. That is definitely where people play a lot in the metaverse right now. And it's not hard to partner with an NFT group if you want to. It's not hard to partner with somebody like OpenSea or Foundation or Super Rare, and leverage that community that already exists. You don't need to build a community. They don't need to be fans of your brand.
You don't need to start your own Discord and start your own project of NFT. Like, you don't have to.
The way I like to describe it is we're in the area right now where you need an AOL keyword, but not quite a website yet. So because AOL is already doing all the heavy lifting for you. They got the community. They can put it up there for you. Don't go try to get your own community on your website. That's a whole ball of wax, maybe in a couple years. So partnerships, really big. Are kind of what my main theme is going to be. But NFTs are everywhere right now. And the only thing that really keep in mind there are some ecological concerns about NFTs, how much energy they consume. There are some eco-friendly NFT options out there as well. So don't let that stop you from jumping into this world and figuring out how they work. The other thing, again, you mentioned the Nike thing with Roblox. That's a really smart way, again, to partner with people. Now, the Nike Roblox thing is a deeper dive. You're talking about going there and creating a whole world. That's going to create that's time. You got to understand how the community works, how the system itself works. You got to go create a world, hire somebody to develop that thing.
And keep it up. The idea is also that it's a perpetual, like it keeps going. The world doesn't stop. So it's like,
that's right.
You need to think the maintenance, right? Like you are starting something like a social account, right? Like you're starting something that could easily become a ghost ship if you don't.
Right. I think there's still a disconnect though with the Nike thing. I'll get to that in a second, but because it's still heavily virtual,
Yes.
doesn't connect to the physical very well, other than you just being there. So leveraging those partnerships, and you'll see things. Of course, everyone wants to talk about Fortnite because Travis Scott and Ariana Grande, and they've done other concerts in there. But the brilliance of why that works is because it leverages the community of Fortnite who are already there. It leverages the gameplay of Fortnite that all those players know how to do. So there was a part in the Ariana Grande one where I can't remember what the lyrics were, but it was something about reaching out and helping each other. And there's an action in Fortnite where you heal each other. You reach down and help each other out. And that's what you did during that time period. So it leverages a natural action that people already know inside the game, in a community. So there was no legwork for Ariana Grande and their team. There's no legwork for Travis Scott's team. They're not even really performing. It's just a pre-recorded track with some motion added to it. But what they're smart is they understand people are in this space, and we're going to let people be in this space and work this space how they do, and we're just going to be there. So those are different because those are lifestyle brands. Those are big. Ariana Grande and Travis Scott being entertainers, right, of course, but and lifestyle brands always have an easier time.
Yeah,
of course,
and you can look at the skins too, and Fortnite and all the things. I mean, they're the masters. They're truly the masters of the mashup and like bringing all these different IPs and everything from Batman to Rick and Morty to all into one playable world. It's fun to watch, but like you said, and it's a little of a cheat on pop marketing. Like those kinds of assets are easier.
Yes,
because they are popular, and celebrity is like it has its own gas tank, right? Like,
totally. I mean, it's the reason that Beats was so popular is because it leveraged celebrity. It leveraged the Olympic team and the NBA so heavily. The reason that
and it already had a story with Dre, right? Like it already had that. Its core DNA was built from that.
But like the marketing behind it was so smart because it was like a little revolutionary. You can't even wear headphones or anything like that. They won't even let those things allowed on the Olympics anymore because of that. So it's interesting that it's the same thing. It's really the same thing, and trying to partner with the right people. I say all that because to get into the metaverses, there's a lot of ways into the metaverse. You and I talked a little bit about this before, and I'd be really bad if I didn't, but AR is huge right now. Everybody has a phone pretty much in any marketable area in the world that has cameras capable of displaying AR. So you'd be hard pressed to find a device that you couldn't activate some sort of an AR experience on, and pretty much every social channel has AR activated as ad units. So not only do you have the capability of using something that's part of the metaverse, it's already an ad unit that's already there. So there's just so many like ways of partnerships between NFTs, partnerships. If you're going to get into world building pieces, definitely partnerships there. But you can go all in and do something like Nike World and Roblox. But I think if I'm going to put any kind of criticism on that activation piece of it, I wish they would have connected it to the real world a little bit more. I wish they would have had employees from Nike in there. I wish they would have felt like if I bought a pair of shoes, I could get them. I wish it would have felt like it was like, I don't know, more connective tissue to the real world, I guess would be a good way to say it. I think that's where the metaverse, kind of fun part of the metaverse is, as I talked at length about before, but pulling, not making it just a virtual thing, because we can kind of already go do that. And if I want a pair of shoes and I want them real bad, I'm going to use the easiest method that I can, which probably isn't a 3D space to go hang out with people to go get shoes, unless I'm absolutely required to be there for like a drop or something. So always keeping that in mind as well with brands is that these aren't the easiest things. People seek these out. These are not, we're at the web of the early days. Right now it's easier, back when the web was around, it was much easier to just go to the store and buy it. It's not that way anymore, but it was back then. So the people who were getting involved in e-commerce were kind of doing so in like a renegade fashion, wanting to put the framework there. But they saw the future and potential of it all. And obviously they reap all the benefits from being some of the first ones there. So I think the metaverse is the same way. I think there's a lot of avenues in there that are really low hanging fruit, which I hate that phrase. Let's call it heavy peach. Heavy peach.
Yeah, I like that.
And
I'll take
I
that.
stole that from Jerry Seinfeld.
Oh, great.
But there's a lot of avenues in that are don't require a lot of legwork. It just requires that you understand the community. And if you don't, the community exists for you to partner with. You can literally go reach out to them and say, I have an idea. NFT space is very, very, very strange. So it's usually helpful to find people who understand how it works.
Don't go in. And Coke had just hit a big one on gaming too. I think gaming's important.
Yes.
And I think they just showed everyone in the world that doesn't matter how much money you have, like you have to connect with the communities now. And like it's not even a chance in hell that you're going to go in there and not be the weirdo in the party, right? Like, who the hell is this guy? Like, I think you're 100% right on. And I would even double down and say, you don't dare. Don't try to go in there on your own and try to act like you own the place. It is not going to go your way. It's not going to go well. Like, how are you going to help this community out? Like, how are you? And the first thing is like by working with the community itself and the leaders
by legitimately being part of the community
and taking the time to understand how it works and what they need. And dude, it ain't rocket science, but it sure the hell is different than a traditional media buy, right? That's what's the problem.
And there's so many great ways to do community engagement with that. I mean, there's one that's like an African elephant where you can collect NFTs of drawings of African elephants, and they take the money and it goes to saving African elephants, and it legitimately does go. The money, I think they probably raised $60,000 or $70,000.
Yeah, it's completely can see where the money's going. It's completely open, and like a lot of non-for-profit, right? Like you can see where that and what is going to where. And also think about this is the dumb stuff too. It's like, if I buy a pair of Nikes, this is coming, I guarantee it. But if I buy a pair of Nikes at a certain place and time, I want to wear those Nikes in my digital world too. I want to wear those Nikes. I want them to be, when I have glasses, I want them to be, what do I get? It's a ticket. It's access. I'm so looking forward to this idea of, we didn't even get to touch, like, fandom being paid back or pay to play. Or
what if you could own your classic 1967 Ford Thunderbird with suicide doors in mint green with your original VIN number as an NFT?
Totally.
Those cars are unique already.
That is a non-fungible item, correct?
Yeah.
Right.
And then you could tie things to it, where it's been, how many owners it's had. You could pass the NFT. I mean, there's like so many cool things.
Think about like car show. I didn't even think about that. Like, if you have that data on each of the car, like how much, usually I'm just walking up to the cars and going, oh, that's cool. Yeah. But if you could have it express different content towards you of like what that thing is about,
Yeah.
Every item.
I think anything that's unique definitely lends itself really well to an NFT, and anything that's not unique, you can make unique. So that's pretty interesting.
Give it a story. It's like we've been doing it for years.
I know, exactly.
Hey, I know you are a busy man, and I'm so grateful to sit down and just chat with you of all the cool stuff that's been going on. I'm excited. I'm so glad you're still excited. You've been in this game for a minute, especially when it comes to creating in the 3D space. You should probably check out your talk about your Spark AR work for a bit, and especially the curriculum, the certification, the stuff that if I were somebody like starting my career or in the middle of my career, even like if you are interested in creating this 3D space, where should they go, or where do you have them?
I would say it's imperative that you understand how these spaces work. The same way that it's important you understand how the web works. So even something as simple as a web request. Oh, I'm sending a thing out to a website and it responds back to me. That simple concept helps you understand how this world works, especially, you don't have to be a developer, but it does give you a firmer grasp over what's possible, how to concept in these spaces, and honestly, just a fundamental inner workings of what's coming. So what I do is I work really closely with social AR, and I do that very specifically for mass audiences. And I do that because I like seeing how people adopt things. I'm a child of AOL, and really liked that. As lauded as AOL was, it really was the birth of the internet for so many of us in the world, because
such an easy on-ramp.
Right. When it's poppy and it's got the wacky pomo, wacky postmodern with the fun triangles and the sprinkles, and it looks like the 90s. I want to play with it. And that's what was so cool about AOL, is that it was marketed well, and it brought this I'll say dumb version of the internet to the world, but that brought the internet to the world regardless. And I feel like social AR is the same way. I'm going to use the word dumb, but it's not, it doesn't take rocket science to connect with people. And it doesn't take a lot of narrative to get people in the door in the very beginning of these things. People are just naturally curious, and word of mouth spreads. People are like, hey, I got to get on that email thing. That's how it all started. They realized that you could do more than just taxes with your computer. And people realized that you can do more than just look at websites with your phone. It gets bigger and bigger and bigger as it goes. So I do a lot of teaching in the curriculum space or I do a lot of teaching in the AR space to create curriculum around augmented reality. So I do a lot of teaching for this piece of software right here, ding, that's called Spark AR. That piece of software is Meta or Facebook's AR software. It works in every camera that Facebook or Meta has access to. So Instagram, Messenger, Portal, Facebook, anything that has a camera that they own. And you can create augmented reality experiences in there. So what I do is, one, I teach people how to use this stuff just from a software standpoint. But what I try to do is inspire people to understand that the world is going to change this way. If you're come from the web development world, you're used to positioning things in X and Y, and now we have to care about Z, which is the depth. That's really it. If you use Photoshop, you're already there because you're using layers. You're already there. If you're using CSS, you use something called a Z index, which is your stack. You're already there. You're already using depth. You're just not visualizing it from the side. So that's all I'm really trying to do, is to get people who come from these traditional areas that have been doing this stuff, or might have just started doing this web development world or illustration world, web design world, to understand that making this leap, you're already there. You're already there. It doesn't require that much. You're just not looking at it from the side. And when you look at it from the side, it's a whole new world. But you can still design in these spaces, and we need people badly. So when I first started doing the web development stuff back in the early 90s, it was very gate kept by developers.
Yep.
And I don't mean that to be in a mean way. It's just the way all software works. The people who understand how to build it are the ones who build it in the beginning.
And I had to steal it. It was awful. I felt awful about it. But,
But
I had no other way. I was very poor.
You had to. But, it took an army of people. It took an army of roles to make the web grow up. It took an army of people who weren't programmers, who dedicated themselves to understanding how people use the web to make the web ubiquitous for everyone. So that's what it's going to take for XR. It's going to get there. We're going to push it through that tunnel regardless. But if you can be involved as a creator, as a strategist, as an experienced designer, or as a developer, we need all those voices. And right now it's wide open. I started doing this no less than 3.5 years ago, and I teach people all around the world. I think last year we had 22,000 people sign up for our curriculum. There's a member, our community is 400,000 strong right now. We have 700 or 800,000 creators on Spark AR. I can't tell you how many hundreds of thousands of people I must have taught over the past couple of years. I'm probably the most popular augmented reality teacher in the world, and I just learned this a couple of years ago. So the world is yours. It really is there, and it's for everyone, and it's coming. And you don't have to stick with Spark. Once you understand the basics, you can jump around and go to other platforms, just like you do with web languages. You don't have to use not Microsoft stuff. You can come use PHP or whatever. The logic is still basically the same. It's still if then else. You're still doing loops. You're still doing all that stuff. So,
but Spark is a great starter, right? Like it is a great place to start.
It is
a really great place to start because it's not. Trust me, I've been in Unreal. I've been in Blender. Like if you start to go into the 3D engine stuff we've talked about, it is not user friendly.
It is not.
I mean, it is really. And you know, I'm used to some wacko stuff, but I jumped in. I'm like, oh, I'm toast. I'm back.
And I'll say Spark wasn't easy when I first got into it. And for the same reasons I'm talking about, it was developer centric, developer focused. It was all about scripting and the way that they phrased everything. Everything was about occlusion. If you don't know what that means, you have to go look it up. You know, occlusion basically just means you're hiding something behind something. You're occluding it behind something else. So if I want to have this pen float around my head, I need to have something to hide behind because it doesn't know my head's there. But just talking in English is so beneficial. So anyway, that's what I do. I do a lot of teaching. I try to do a lot of mass outreach to people who are coming from the web development world or coming from the traditional ad world, traditional illustrator world, traditional creative world, who feel like I can't do this. All I know is Photoshop, or all I know is CSS, or all I know is JavaScript. Dude, come on by. I promise you, that's where I started too. I started just knowing how to do scripting. There's some people who just know how to do shading. There's some people who just know how to do modeling. There's some people who just know how to do computer vision to detect things in the scene. There's a lot of us out there who just know how to do one thing. You don't know how to do any of it. You don't have to know how to do any of it. You can jump into it knowing what you already know, promise. And that's because the tools are so easy and they're only going to get easier. So heed that warning. They're only going to get easier to do this stuff.
Yeah, meaning so more creators, more opportunities, and it's inevitable. So, and I'm not selling anything. You're not selling anything. It's like all of that's free, and it's like get in now. And I'm just saying it and I know you feel the same about it. I'm saying it because I want more people to feel like they could write their own story and create their own stuff, and I'm not saying it's going to have an executive position. For a creator, it's a really crazy good time. You know,
it's amazing.
It's just a really opportunity. I would hate for people, if you're listening to this, I'd hate for you to miss it or feel scared of it. Just don't feel scared of it. It's like, there's plenty of on-ramps, and God, like I've said, it's like most of them are free. There's one where like right here. It's like,
it's all free. There's a ton of great, that's one reason I really like the Spark AR side of things, is because the community is so robust and everybody helps each other. Some other communities aren't quite as robust. But that's because we all made it that way. We all just chipped in and I started making tutorials way in the early on, and then other people did, and then we all just started sharing scripts and stuff. So, and the reason was because we realized a rising tide raises all boats. The more people that do this, the more brands are going to want to get on it. The more I can get other brands in my hands and show it out, the more brands come to me and ask me for it. So that was a really early on thing. And I think it's just really important if you don't use Spark, just learn something to do with spatial design. That could be game design. It could be game development. It could be 3D modeling. It can be computer vision. Most people are coming from like a creative background. So you can learn Photoshop or Illustrator. That's fine. You can take all those layers and pull them all back out and make something really cool with your flat design. You do not even need to know 3D. Tons of people don't do that. So, just dive in and don't be scared. It's really, really, really simple.
I'm so much gratitude to spend the last hour and a half with you as usual. Very enlightening. Appreciate you just being around, you being here, and I'm really, especially through this one versus the last one. You always, even when you're crazy busy, I feel like you have a good grasp of your vision or how you see it, what you're wanting to do. That might change a bunch, and
it does change a bunch.
But it just it helps me, especially with all this amazing stuff going on, to kind of see it in different kind of perspectives on it. I really appreciate it. Huge points of view that I loved. I make people want to play with it. I think that makes it so. I've heard so much crap talking on metaverse, on really the future of the internet are these really boring things. Why do people talk about the metaverse? And I'm like, you don't understand humans. You are.
Yeah, they said that about the.
You don't understand humans. That stuff is important, but you got to make me want to play with it. And the metaverse is that perfect word that would just comes. It wasn't like inventing anything. It was around what was already going on, but it just fell into place as that word that makes you want to play with it.
It does. And you're totally right.
And that is how popular. That's how it works. It's how it works.
I remember
people
my dad
aren't going to get excited about machine learning right now, or they're not, and it's okay. That people aren't holding up signs about that, and instead they think it's pretty kick-ass that they can go inside of watch a concert on Roblox, and that's cool. Or if they go outside, I can tell what any plant is when I go on a hike with my daughter, and I look like the ultimate woodsman because I can take a picture of a leaf, and it tells me where I'm at and what kind of plant that is. That's pretty badass.
You know what? Don't let anyone ever tell you that apps like that or Google are destroying your brain, because there's a great quote from Socrates, and you can go look it up, of him complaining about his students having books, because to him, books ruined your memory. Because you didn't have to remember it anymore.
Yeah. So hey,
we were given this. Been this way.
It's always been. And then from print to radio to all of them, trust me, you want to go back into the news and see the articles written, it's always going to end. Because guess what? It is change. And we are of both that fundamental and more that, the other side of
Extremism.
We've always been that way. How it works. So.
Totally. It's like you said, it's if you want to make people play with something, I mean, that's really the goal. The goal is just to get people in there and they want to play with it, because the very first iteration of the internet was connecting libraries together. And my dad was so excited about it. And he was like, it's amazing. We're connecting libraries together. And I remember saying something about wouldn't it be cool to watch TV shows? And he was like, that's not what it's for.
Yeah. Yes. That's not the exciting part. But
I love my dad, but he was wrong.
He is wrong, but that's an engineer talking, I'm guessing.
Yes.
That's an engineer. I know him. It's and it's awesome, but that's that order side, right? This is what the tool's for. I'm not thinking of it on the outside. And I love talking to you because I get to blow things up and talk about those. And thanks for the last hour and a half of just Luke Hurd and going back and forth between philosophy and stuff that you can actionably use. I love that. It's a good mix.
I'm so happy you invited me back on here. I've been wanting to come back on here and just
so great. Thanks so much for coming on. You can find Luke Hurd everywhere on the internet. It's really not tough to find you, but you can see the show notes. Thanks, man.
Thank you so much.
Take it easy, and see everybody on the next Pop Marketing Podcast. Later, Gator.